Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional, a former Air Force veteran from Winchester, UK, Mandy Hickson. Mandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. Mandy is a former RAF fast jet pilot, a best-selling author, and a keynote speaker. And she's the author of a book which is titled An Officer and Not a Gentleman. And we're going to talk about her book. So Mandy, let me start by asking you to tell us about your own journey in brief and what attracted you to become a fast jet pilot.
Yeah, so my grandfather was a pilot during the Second World War, and I think I grew up hearing his stories. So when I was about 13 years old, the Air Cadets, which is an organisation run by the Royal Air Force to encourage youngsters into the military and give them basically a little bit of a vision into what life is like. And they opened their doors to girls, and I joined and I flew. And literally the second I got airborne, I thought, this is what I want to do. But there were a few obstacles because women weren't allowed to be pilots in the Air Force. I know that India was a bit ahead of us actually on that one. And so I'd chosen a career that didn't actually technically exist on paper. But I started to chip away at the impossible dream, and I was awarded a flying scholarship. I gained my private pilot's license. And then from there, I went off to university. And when I was studying at university, I joined another Royal Air Force club. And in the second year, they changed the rules and I applied to join. Sadly, I failed all of the tests to be a pilot, not just once, but twice. And that's it. It should have been the end of the line for me. But I was very lucky that someone really believed in me and spotted a talent within me to fly. And it was the boss of this club. And he basically pointed out to the Air Force that, I was performing at quite a high level in the air. It didn't seem to sit parallel with those test results. So they investigated and they found out that about 70% of women who were taking these tests were failing them outright. And about 70% of men were passing them. So there was an unconscious bias that was existing within their testing system.
Wow.
And in the end, they took me on as a test case and they said, right, well, let's see how far she can get before she failed, which is what they actually said to me as well. So, yeah, I was given the chance of a lifetime, but being told in this small undercurrent that you probably won't make it, which was quite a big burden to bear, really, because I think it planted the seeds of doubt and the seeds of imposter syndrome and that slight concern that you are starting one of the toughest training courses in the world. And you probably won't, and you're being told that you won't make it on paper. And so that's a big challenge.
How amazing. How amazing. And, for my own clarification, what is a fast jet pilot and what is a jet pilot?
Do you know what? It's a really good question, Natasha. And I often get asked this one because I think I was going to say a fighter pilot, but then I wasn't really a fighter pilot. I was a bombing pilot. So I flew the Tornado GR4, which is a ground attack aircraft and reconnaissance aircraft. So the fighters tend to go off and they would fly against other airplanes, sort of Top Gun-esque, and then the bombing aircraft would come in as well. So that was my role. I was primarily that. But basically, if you say that you are a bomber pilot, people don't really get that. So if you say that you're a fighter pilot or a fast jet pilot, there's not really a difference between a fast jet and a jet pilot, but they often refer to it's just the same thing as a fast jet pilot. And it basically just think Top Gun, those classic aircraft.
No, I understand. And what would you say was a very, very memorable experience during your time as a fast jet pilot?
There was one mission that I was on in Iraq where we were engaged by a surface-to-air missile, and I was leading a full ship of aircraft, defending the no-fly zone over southern Iraq. And it happened at night, and I was a very junior pilot at the time, but we're very much empowered to lead missions so that you build up your leadership skill set from a very early stage of your career. And when we were engaged by the missile, we put out our countermeasures, our flares, which basically decoyed the missile from hitting us, and it took those flares. And then we had a very complex mission that came out from that one, where we were then retasked to basically a response option on a target in Iraq. And it turned into probably one of the most memorable nights of my life because I learned so much about leadership, about decision making under pressure, about overcoming a fear of failure, of letting my team down. And I learned about all the training that we've had, how it absolutely comes to the forefront in that exact moment. And there's a reason that we practice and practice in the simulator, on the ground, so that when it comes to actually flying the aircraft in a war zone, it doesn't come as a shock and you don't go into fight, flight or freeze mode. You can then process that information.
Amazing. And since you just spoke about leadership, what would you say are some of the leadership lessons you have learned during your time with the Air Force or the Royal Air Force?
Yeah. So one of the big things is that, and anyone in the military will know this, is that when you start your military training, for an officer, you're basically given 9 months of leadership training. So before you've learned any skills about how to do a job, you're being taught how to be a leader, because there is that philosophy of basically leadership is not a statement, it's not a title, it's a noun, it's what we do to lead. And so you need to have those skills so that when you start in whatever role that you're going into, you can display really good leadership skills from the outset of your career. And if you think about most businesses, they will never do that. You will learn the tools of the trade, and then if you're good enough, you might get sent on a leadership course, or worst case scenario, you're promoted but without any leadership training. And then you are basically trying to think, well, I'm just wanting to do my job better, but it's a completely different role. And I think there's a real difference between management and leadership. I think management is when we basically take the system round and round and we manage the process, we manage the people. And I think leadership is when we take that to the next level. So we stop the spinning circle and we take it off at a tangent, and actually often raising the game or raising the performance of that team or of that organization. And I think the way that we do that very much is something that I would talk about a lot, is about really empowering our junior people, because the skills that we are seeing coming in these days, especially, we are seeing a lot of cognitive diversity within the youngsters that are coming in. And I think if we have the classic hierarchical structure whereby leader at the top, start at the bottom and don't really speak up, well, we're missing out on a lot of talent. And actually empowerment is one of the words that's been overplayed a lot, I know. But when you think about what is empowerment, so on the night that my boss encouraged me to lead and everything went very complex, he never leapt in and took control. So we're now in a potentially an emergency / a much more critical situation, and yet you have not got your senior officer basically saying, I'm taking over, I'm taking control. And that is what empowerment looks like. It's about challenging our youngsters to step up. It's about providing skills, knowledge and tools, but not taking over when the going gets tough.
Amazing. And for my viewers and listeners, can you describe a typical day in the life of a fast jet pilot?
Yeah, so it depends really whether you're in training or whether you're in an area of conflict. But a typical day at home when you're operating from an RAF base, we would turn up very early to a MET brief, a weather brief. And it's almost the start.
When you say early, how early?
It depends what shift you're on. So sometimes if you're on an afternoon session, you might go in at 8:30. But if you're on the morning wave, you might well go in at about 7 o'clock. And then some people might be night flying. So they would come in later on at about 2 or 3 o'clock. So you'll have different people doing different training so they can utilize those aircraft to the best of their abilities as well. And you would do the weather brief, you would get all the information for the day. From that, you would work out what do we need to do, where are the gaps within our training schedule. You would then start to be put up on the board as to what you're going to go and do. And you'd actually know that the day before. They would always know the weather pretty much. And then you would plan. And the planning stage can be, for a mission, would be about 4 hours sometimes, including the briefing. And so you would get together with your team, be it 4 aircraft, which for myself, there was 2 people in each aircraft. So that would be 8 people. And you would assign all the tasks. Everyone would get on with all their different jobs. And then you would come together for a briefing. And the briefing would be about 45 minutes. From there, you go to an out brief. So now you're all standing around and you have an authorizing officer who basically says, have you done this? Have you done that? So it's almost like your go-to checklist of, right, has everything been covered? Where are your emergency diversions? What will you do if the weather is poor? And something else that we're always asked as well on that weather brief is we always have an emergency of the day. So again, you're constantly looking at planning ahead so that when things happen in the air, again, the emergency of the day is just thrown at you. you don't know what it is. And so you've got to recall, right, what are the drills? What do I need to do? Okay, is that an emergency one, as in you've got to remember the drills, or is it that I get my cards out, my flight reference cards, and I can work through it?
Correct.
And because we're constantly doing that, when something happens in the air, you're constantly reviewing all of your emergency procedures. So it's not a crisis, it's not an emergency, it's a response, not a reaction. You would go and fly your mission, even just starting it up, taxiing and takeoff will take 45 minutes, getting all your kit on. So you have a lot of different kit depending on the time of year it is as well. So for any of the listeners, you know, we wear long johns all year round, which are they're a defense mechanism, because the suits that we wear, the flying suits, are fire retardant. But if you don't have a layer between your skin and that, if you're in a fire, you would bubble inside it, your skin would burn. So you have to wear a protective layer of cotton, which is the long johns and this thermal outlet layer. And then we would wear the flying suits, and then over the top, if it's summer, we would put our G suit on, which is basically like a pair of old-fashioned cowboy chaps type thing you would see in the films. But it basically go around the waist, and then there are inflatable pockets all the way down the legs, and we click that G suit into our aircraft. So as we pull G-force, it gives us a layer of protection, so we don't start to black out if you're experiencing a lot of G-force. Wow. And then there's a lot of kit you put on the top, and then we would go off, take off, fly a mission, come back, and after every single mission, well, firstly, we get a cup of tea, because we are British after all. We have a cup of tea, and then we debrief, and we always run through a debrief after every single flight. And I think it's a wonderful lesson to read across to businesses as well, because I often say, do you debrief? And businesses say, not as often as we should, or only when something goes wrong. And I think getting into that habit of debriefing, even after a meeting, you know, I might finish our chat and I'll say, Mandy, what went well? What went badly? What can you do better next time? And just by constantly looking and reviewing where you are personally, but also as a group, it enables us to improve. And it's those incremental steps that we're always after. So we always debrief, and we say, there's no hierarchical gradient. So we often say, like, leave our stripes at the door, so that it's a flat gradient. So you might have most senior officer in your formation, but they're just a member of the team. And so you want openness, you want honesty, and you want accountability. So you really want people to hold up their hand to mistakes, and that's a very safe area to do that. And so that's the best learning curve you can get.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you. What a great response. One more question relating to your flight, and then you're being your jet pilot, and then I'll move to your book. How has your own experience as a fast jet pilot influenced your approach to life and work after leaving the Royal Air Force?
What a lovely question. I think it makes you appreciate what you've done. I have a lot of gratitude in my life as a whole, but I've lost a lot of friends. You know, it's a dangerous thing to do. And going through flying training, I helped 2 people plan a mission, and they never came back. So the reality of loss of life of very talented people at a very early stage of their careers is very acute. And so I think you start to recognize that we are the lucky ones. I feel honored to have served my country, honored to have had the opportunity to fly fast jets. And I think you also therefore build up a perception of what is risky, what is not. So I love the thrill of speed. I know that will surprise you. So I grasp life with both hands. So I think after I've left, I recognize that I do a lot of public speaking now and motivational speaking, but that's quite a lonely world in many ways, because I meet a lot of people, but not for building a long-term relationship with. And so I filled the gap there by doing a lot of adventure training. So I've just come back from the base camp of Everest on an expedition. A few years ago, I did Kilimanjaro, and I love that camaraderie. I love pushing myself. I love learning about myself in what we call grade 3 fun, where it's no fun at all, but when you look back, you're so proud of what you've achieved. And I think it's that recognizing that it's important on your self-development to constantly learn and constantly push yourself. And so I think that sense of adventure has stayed with me, and it's certainly how I brought my children up, to really challenge the boundaries, push themselves as well. And you know, and I see that I would be the mum saying, climb to the top of the tree, but make sure you're holding on tightly, you know, go to where you feel comfortable. You know, so whereas a lot of the other mothers would be going, come down, don't go up, you might fall, you know, and I would never say that. You know, I think it's really important to let people grow.
Right, well said. So, Mandy, now let's talk about your book, An Officer and Not a Gentleman. And I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mandy Hickson's book, An Officer, Not a Gentleman. I'll go and check out the book myself. Tell me a little bit about your book and what inspired you to write it.
Well, it's a very good question, because I am not a writer and I had no desire, in all honesty and truth, to write a book. And yet, when I left the Air Force 12 years ago, I started doing a lot of speaking at schools. From the schools, it led to parents contacting me saying, could you speak at our business because we think you'd be brilliant. And then often they'd say, have you written a book? And I'd always say, no, I can't write. I'm all around maths and STEM, sort of engineering sort of brain, not interested in writing. It's not an answer. I don't like that. And so I would shy away from that. And then actually I was asked so often that I started to say, well, not yet. And what you'll know and you'll find yourself doing is, if you ever have something that you're not keen on doing, as soon as you start saying not yet, you're opening up a world of possibility that you might do it. And so I then basically decided, if I was going to do this, I would need some help. So I worked with a great friend of mine who was a wonderful writer and a journalist who knew me really well from university days. And they had a gap in their schedule. And so we worked together to create An Officer, Not a Gentleman. And we gained a literary agent. We sent it out to all the publishing houses, but I was rejected from all of them. And I was a little bit surprised, because there weren't any other books in the UK written by fast jet pilots, or female fast jet pilots. And my best rejection email said, plain books offer a male readership that have no interest in a woman's story. Wow. And that's what rejected me. And I thought, well, if that's your attitude, I will self-publish this. And I did. I self-published it on Amazon. It's a fantastic facility to be able to do that. And I think it really opens up your thinking as to what you can achieve. And we don't need to have boundaries put into place. I like the speed of it. I like the fact that if someone in India wants to buy my book, they can receive it 2 or 3 days later from Amazon, because it's printed locally. And so, so basically I self-published it. It went to the #1 best-selling book in aviation. It sat there for quite some time. It's been taken over now by other books. And the highest ranking it got on the UK charts was the 11th best-selling book. And at one point I was beating Barack Obama, who was in second position in the autobiographies after mine. So, yeah, I think believing in yourself is really important. And I think finding the people, your team around you, if you have gaps in your knowledge or your skill set, well, then use other people. And that's exactly what I did.
Well said. And can you share an interesting anecdote from your book that you feel is particularly empowering or insightful?
Yeah, I will do one very, very quickly. I was about to fail fast jet training. I was really struggling. My imposter syndrome was hitting me. I was thinking I was not good enough. And my friends basically took me out, my rest of my course mates, and we went out onto our bikes, and they had stuck little aeroplane wings on their bikes as jokes. And the one thing I'd been failing was something called battle turns. And it was basically about going off and you're flying as a two-ship of airplanes. And if you need to turn left or right, you've got to think about the geometry, because if you just turn left, your wingman would be behind you. And so basically what happens is that both airplanes pull up, and you would then cross at 90 degrees at a perpendicular angle. And then you roll out on your new heading and you're in perfectly aligned formation. And that's what I was failing. I just couldn't seem to get my head around it. I was so focused on the numbers and the detail. I was not seeing the bigger picture. And they took me to this big parade square, and we started to cycle around on our bikes with them yelling 30 left, 60 right. And we did all the maneuvers I couldn't grasp in the air on the ground. And suddenly everything fell into place. I thought, this is so easy. And I flew the trip the next day and I passed. When I said to my instructor, I'm blown away, and he said, what's happened, Mandy? This is like flying with a different pilot. I told him what the course mates had done. And he said, wow, that's amazing, because you are in competition. And actually, there are only about 6 spaces for your course to fly the fast jets on the front line. Those courses were starting in a few months' time. He said, one of you might well be waiting for up to a year now. And one of your friends has jeopardized his career advancement by about a year. And I think when he said that, it really brought together so much that I felt was encompassed within the book, because it brought about selfless behavior, brought about building trust within teams, brings about cognitive diversity, about having people in our teams who think differently. It's about encouraging people to speak up. it stops us getting tunnel vision, listen to our teammates, everybody bringing something different. And I just think that whole sense of camaraderie and sense of purpose that is so powerful within the military, but also within organizations when you do come together and work on a project, I think it's amazing. And I think that probably brings together so much of what I was trying to bring about.
Fascinating. So time for two more questions, Mandy. My next question, and I remember when I wrote my first book, which was also autobiographical.
And you have written many now, haven't you?
Many, but it was a very cathartic experience, and it helped me reflect on my entire life.
Yeah.
My question to you is, how has your book, or writing your book, An Officer and Not a Gentleman, helped you reflect on and process your experiences in the Air Force?
Yeah, a great deal, actually. I found it very cathartic as well, to be honest, Satosh, because I think when you're writing a book, fortunately for myself, we have a logbook and it goes through every single flight you ever fly. And as I was going through those and reflecting on ones that would be really interesting to talk about, or ones where something had happened, you realize that you've had such this wealth of learning. And actually, if you can try to share that with people in the right sense to make them, easily accessible. But it's also made me realize that when I was in the Air Force, I spent a lot of time just wanting to be one of the team, wanting to be one of the boys. I'd sort of changed my behavior to fit in. And I never wanted a light to be shone on me. And then when I left, and I obviously started doing public speaking, you realize that actually you have a responsibility to the next generation.
Right.
Make sure that the ladder is not pulled up behind you, that others can flow freely. And I think more and more exposure we give to women and, to anyone that's done a different sort of job, then ultimately, our youngsters are seeing that and they're thinking, wow, I could do that. I grew up in very humble, a humble upbringing, a humble family. I was certainly not advantaged in any way, shape or form. And I think people see that I can do it, then they can do it. And so I just believe that by writing the book, it's made me realize just how you can be such a powerful role model to so many. I have people contacting me from all over the world, especially young people, but actually I've had veterans contacting. I've had people from business saying, you didn't realize, but this is an incredible business book as well. I think, gosh, so actually the reach that you can have, I think, by writing a book or by getting your thoughts onto paper is way more powerful than I ever would have imagined it would be.
Amazing. And my last question to Mandy, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. You're one of the early people or early women who actually broke the so-called glass ceiling as a fast jet pilot. So my question is, what would you say are 3 lessons you would give to young men and women who are starting off on their lives? And all of us are confronted with some kind of hurdle, some kind of biases, etc., etc. And yet, as we look back at life 20 years later, we all think we did overcome them. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
I think the first one I would say is to believe in yourself. I think as a youngster, when you're growing up, often you will have people around you, be the form of teachers, parents, friends that will say, oh, you're really good at that. You can do that. And you think, oh, I don't know if I can. And we always worry. We worry about what people will think. But people aren't often thinking anything. We overplay it in our minds. So I think actually believing in yourself and then doing everything that you can to achieve that goal. So not just thinking, oh, I believe I could become an astronaut. What can you actively do to achieve it? And I think it's about recognizing that it is a tough pathway. But my second point would be about having a really strong sense of purpose, because actually, and I know that a lot of people don't know what they want to do. And I think sometimes that is just as difficult, because it's about finding what you want to do. But I would say find something that you love doing and work out how you can make that your career. Because, even if it's something that people I love chatting to people, well, then you're a great communicator. So don't go into a job which is sitting in an office auditing numbers. Find the thing that actually works for you. And so having that purpose, because if you have purpose, you will now be able to build up resilience. Because I had never realized, I don't think, until I'd written my book or I started doing a lot of talking about this. But, resilience is linked to purpose, because if you have a direction and a goal and you don't achieve it or something happens, if you don't have that sense of purpose, you'll just think, well, I'll give up. But if you really want to achieve it, you will work out a different way of getting there. And that is resilience. And we don't want to talk about failure because we often think of failure as a bad thing, but failure is actually where all of our lessons are learned.
Right.
And so don't be scared of failing, because my son came back from school one day and said, "It's the first attempt in learning, Mum." And I thought, I love that. Failure, first attempt in learning.
Yeah.
And it is so true, because you will never, ever learn unless we fail properly.
Correct.
And so what we've got, believe in myself. I've got
have a strong sense of purpose,
and that will give us the resilience. And the third thing I would probably say is surround yourself with an amazing team of people and invest in that team. I am talking friendships. Be the person that remembers the birthdays, that remembers the names of children. You know, be the person that actively listens to our friends and our colleagues, because that team around you will be the people that will be there throughout the whole of your life. And that's something that has been really, really important.
Well said. And on that note, Mandy, on your amazing lessons, believe in yourself, have a strong sense of purpose, don't be scared of failing, and surround yourself with a great team of people, whether it's friends or colleagues, because they're really your support staff or support network. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. Thank you for speaking to me about your time as a fast jet pilot. Thank you also for speaking to me about your book, An Officer, Not a Gentleman. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.